Hello, everybody, and either welcome or welcome back to the Gender Libertarian Podcast. If you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. So, this is the time where I would normally be doing a weekly roundup of news that has happened over the past week, but obviously the last episode I did already focused on the Democratic debates, which were Tuesday and Wednesday of this week, although it feels like they were a freaking month ago because so much has happened since then. And what else has happened since then? And what I really want to focus this particular episode on is one story in particular, obviously, and that is the shooting that happened in El Paso. It was around 10:30 a.m. on Saturday. I'm recording this on the 4th. And let me go ahead and just preface this by saying that all of this information that I have right now is as of this recording. Obviously, I'm sure there will be more information forthcoming, but this is where we're at right now. The shooter's name is Patrick Christius. I've seen reports that he's either 20 or 21. And so, like I said, and I'm sure everybody who doesn't live under a rock already knows what's going on with this story. But as of this recording, there are 20 people dead and 26 people wounded. And I want to talk about this because I want to talk about this story in particular, but there's a lot of other topics that kind of touch on this topic, this idea of how we talk about mass shootings and the conversations that kind of come up in the wake of these mass shootings. And as I'm sure you just noticed, I did choose to name the shooter, and I will talk about that in a second, but what ended up happening here, like logistically speaking, Christius actually lives in Allen, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas, and he drove to El Paso. So he's not from El Paso. El Paso is a border town, obviously, and it's about a 10-hour drive from Allen to El Paso. So this wasn't like some kind of just like, oh, I was in the neighborhood kind of thing. Like, this was, at least to my mind, obviously a very specific target. Like, you don't get in your car and just randomly drive for 10 hours looking for a Walmart to go shoot up. Like, it was pretty obvious that this was his intended target. He intended to go to El Paso, which I learned from reading about this whole incident, that El Paso is actually the town in the United States that has the highest Latino/Hispanic population. It's actually 80% Hispanic/Latino. So again, it leads credence to the fact that this was a hate crime. Like, he was specifically targeting Mexicans, and he even said in interviews after he was captured, because he is still alive, he is in police custody, and it's come out during interviews with them that he has point blank said that he went there to kill as many Mexicans as possible. So this wasn't like a random one-off thing. Like, it's pretty obvious what he was trying to accomplish here. And so that is where we're at with that right now. Like I said, he is in custody. I'm sure there will be more information forthcoming. But in the wake of this whole thing going on, there's been a lot going on. And the one thing that I saw reported that really does bother me, and I hope this is a rumor, I hope it's not true, but I saw reports circulating around online that some of the victims of this mass shooting were afraid to go to the hospital, did not go to the hospital because they were afraid that ICE would be there to try to apprehend them. And for what it's worth, this situation right now, ICE has already said that this is basically like a safe place. They're not going to mess with anybody who's going to the hospital to receive treatment after this shooting, but just the idea that anybody would even have to think that just really bothers me. And it speaks to this current situation that we're in right now, culturally, temperature-wise, with immigration. And that plays into this too, because like I said, it's pretty obvious what the goal was here, even before Christius said that he went to go kill as many Mexicans as possible. Like, it's pretty obvious if you go buy a gun and drive 10 hours to go to a place where you know there's a bunch of Mexicans, it's pretty obvious what you're trying to do. So, anyway, moving on to some of the broader topics in this, and the first one that always comes up after these sorts of things, especially lately, since it seems to be this thing where now these mass shooters want to be known, like to leave manifestos, and Christius did too, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but there's always this first kind of discussion of whether to name or not name this person. And my first impulse has always been the very contrarian side of me, basically saying, fuck you, I'm not going to name you because I'm not going to give you the attention that you're seeking. But on second thought and on deeper reflection, I think that it's important to kind of look at this in the way of every time these things happen and they get reported, everybody focuses on the how. Everybody focuses on how many guns did this person have? What kind of guns did they use? What kind of ammo did they use? What did they have on them? Did they have on bulletproof vests? Did they not? This, that, and the other. And I think it's a lot more instructive to talk about the who and the why versus the how, which means that by definition, you have to name this person. You have to discuss these manifestos that they leave behind, because the who and the why is a lot more telling than the how. And for what it's worth, like I said, everybody always wants to focus on the guns on these things. And to me, like, the how can always be swapped out for something else. Like, even if you banned all guns tomorrow, there would be something else. And like, you see this in Europe where they do have very strict gun laws, but you still have people doing these mass attacks, and they're using knives, they're using vehicles, they're using pipe bombs. Like, not to be like morbid about this, but if you actually wanted to kill a whole lot of people in a short amount of time, there's ways way more efficient than one person with a gun. And it doesn't take a lot of Googling to find these ways and the ways to create these sorts of weapons. So focusing on the how just seems very counterproductive to me. And it's focusing on a symptom of a problem and not the root cause, which the root cause of this is the ideology of the person who's doing it. I mean, so on that level, it's like we kind of have to have this conversation. No matter how much it irks to give these people what they want as far as the attention, the fame, the notoriety. But if we're going to start to understand what it is that's going on here and how to combat this or to try to stop this, then it's what we have to do. And it sucks, but that is what it is. And so that's why I've decided to name this guy. And I've actually decided that I will read the manifesto to you guys because it's relatively short. And it's not like the Christchurch manifesto that was just like, I don't even remember how many pages that was, but I was like, I'm not reading that whole damn thing. That's crazy. And I want to read the manifesto because of what is in it. And it's disturbing in a way that a lot of the things that are in this manifesto are not what is being presented as extreme edge wackadoo thought. Like, there's a lot of this that is very mainstream conservative / Republican talking points. And that's another thing and another reason why I want to go through it and look at what it is this guy wrote. And for what it's worth, it seemed like this has been vetted, that this did come from Christius. And a lot of the statements that he said since being taken into custody kind of backs up that this is his. So I am going to go off the fact that this is, as much as it can be verified, yes, it has been verified that he did write this. And the origins of this is he posted it on 8chan about 15 minutes-ish or so before he started his shooting spree. So this was posted on 8chan, which, I mean, this is another thing, another 8chan thing. The same way with the Christchurch shooter who posted, I think he posted his manifesto on 8chan and also, like, live streamed his massacre. But it bothers me because every time this kind of stuff comes up, the first thing people want to do is say, well, we have to get rid of 8chan. Like, that's not going to solve the problem. Like, 8chan isn't the problem. The ideology is the problem. Taking away the website is only going to push this further underground and make it that much harder to find these people when they do wackadoo shit like this. Like, you don't want this to be any more underground than it already is. And it's not going to go away. Like, just taking away 8chan isn't going to make these people go away. They're going to either just move 8chan to another server because they're hosted by Cloudflare, which there's a whole controversy about that, about who Cloudflare does and does not allow on their services. I know I've discussed this before, but the one site that they did end up kicking off, Daily Stormer, it's still there. It's still alive and well on a different server, and according to the Daily Stormer people, they actually have more active users than they did when they were on Cloudflare. So that just kind of proves the point that, like, deplatforming people doesn't make them go away. And in a lot of ways, it gives the people being deplatformed a stronger leg to stand on to wave their hands in the air and claim victimhood status and say, oh, look, we're so persecuted. They threw us off because we were exercising our free speech and blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, no, don't leave 8chan where it's at, where we can all see the incredibly fucked up shit that's on there. And there is fucked up shit on there. But I mean, I would rather it be there than somewhere else. So, anyway, told you all that to tell you this, that is where the manifesto was posted, and I'm not entirely sure of the timeline on this because, like I said, the timestamp was about 15 minutes before Christia started, but I've heard reports that the manifesto was already being, like, looked into by the FBI and local PD before the incident started. So if we're looking at, like, that 15-minute window, that's insanely fast. And it kind of leads a little bit of credence to what Cloudflare has said without entirely point-blank saying it, which is that the reason they leave 8chan up is because they have been asked to by law enforcement. They don't specifically say 8chan specifically that they've been asked to do that, but they have put out a statement saying that there are sites that they host that law enforcement has asked them to keep hosting for the purposes of monitoring the sites. So, how much truth there is to that, I don't know, but if it is true that the manifesto was being researched before the shooting started taking place, that's a very, very short time window, and that would lead a lot of credence to that idea that Cloudflare hosts them and that law enforcement is actually actively monitoring 8chan. So to get into the manifesto itself, and if you're not interested in knowing this, it's fine. You can go ahead and click out of this. We'll see you again next Thursday. That's fine. But like I said, I feel like it's important to understand the motivations behind mass shooters and what they're doing and kind of their rationale that they're leaving behind in these manifestos. So, manifesto is titled The Inconvenient Truth. Which, why are we ripping off Al Gore? Like, I shouldn't be making jokes because this isn't funny, but that was just the first thing I thought when I saw that. I'm like, oh my boy. Anyway, first section, about me. In general, I support the Christchurch shooter and his manifesto. This attack is in response to the Hispanic invasion of Texas. They are the instigators, not me. I am simply defending my country from cultural and ethnic replacement brought on by an invasion. Some people will think this statement is hypocritical because of the nearly complete ethnic and cultural destruction brought to the Native Americans by our European ancestors, but that just reinforces my point. The natives didn't take the invasion of Europeans seriously, and now what is just left is a shadow of what was. My motives for this attack are not at all personal. Actually, the Hispanic community was not my target before I read The Great Replacement. This manifesto will cover the political and economic reasons behind my attack, my gear, my expectations of what the response will generate, and my personal motivations and thoughts. Whew, there's a lot to unpack just right there. And a thing that is very interesting is the use of the word invasion. Now, if you spend any time online and you spend any time in any kind of capacity listening to what passes for conservative/Republican talking points, you've heard the word invasion before. You know where the hell that came from. And I've seen reports that apparently Donald Trump, or whoever runs Donald Trump's account, is actually scrubbing tweets that contain the word invasion. Which is very interesting because I've not really known him to delete tweets outside of like ones with horrible spelling errors. But yeah, that was really fascinating to me. That's all of a sudden like somebody's trying to whitewash out the fact that this word invasion didn't come out of nowhere. Like this has been a right-wing talking point for a very long time. Another thing in here is the mention of the Great Replacement. Now, if you don't know what that is, it is a book that basically postulates that white people will be replaced by someone or something else, and that it is a source of great agita and concern and must be fought. It's pretty much used at this point as white nationalist propaganda. So his citing of having read The Great Replacement and then all of a sudden finding Hispanics to be a problem, yeah, there's a little bit of radicalization going on in there. But I want to move to the next section, which is titled Political Reasons, because this is the one that really kind of scared me. In short, America is rotting from the inside out, and peaceful means to stop this seem to be nearly impossible. The inconvenient truth is that our leaders, both Democrats and Republicans, have been failing us for decades. They are either complacent or involved in one of the biggest betrayals of the American public in our history. The takedown of the United States government by unchecked corporations. I could write a 10-page essay on all the damage these corporations have caused, but here is what is important. Due to the death of the baby boomers, the increasingly anti-immigrant rhetoric of the right, and the ever-increasing Hispanic population, America will soon become a one-party state. The Democrat Party will own America, and they know it. They've already begun this transition by pandering heavily to the Hispanic voting bloc in the first Democratic debate. They intend to use open borders, free health care for illegals, citizenship, and more to exact a political coup by importing and then legalizing millions of new voters. With policies like these, the Hispanic support for Democrats will likely become nearly unanimous in the future. The heavily Hispanic population in Texas will make us a Democrat stronghold. Losing Texas and a few other states with heavily Hispanic population to the Democrats is all it would take for them to win nearly every presidential election. Although the Republican Party is also terrible, many factions within the Republican Party are pro-corporation. Pro-corporation equals pro-immigration. But some factors within the Republican Party don't prioritize corporations over our future. So the Democrats are nearly unanimous with their support of immigration, while the Republicans are divided over it. At least with Republicans, the process of mass immigration and citizenship can be greatly reduced. Now, why do I find that frightening? I mean, that could have been lifted out of a Tucker Carlson monologue. Like, everything that was just in that section constitutes mainstream conservative thought right now. That's what guys like Tucker and Hannity push. That's what the National Conservative Movement pushes. There's nothing in there that would be considered edgy or extreme to the modern conservative movement at all. Like, that's almost just basic, like, level 1 shit. But this is what he's citing as a reason for him to go drive 10 hours to a Walmart in El Paso to try to kill as many Mexican people as he possibly can. Like, rhetoric matters. And whether the people who spout the shit believe it or not, there are people listening to it who do believe it and are acting on it. That's a little frightening. Like I said, this isn't edgy shit here. This is just basic. This could have came out of any Republican's mouth. Like, any Republican talking head, any elected Republican senator or congressperson with a few notable exceptions. Yeah. And it was just used to justify killing 20 people. I'm just blown away by that. But moving on. Next section. Economic reasons. In short, immigration can only be detrimental to the future of America. Continued immigration will make one of our biggest issues of our time, automation, so much worse. Some sources say that in under 2 decades, half of American jobs will be lost to it. Of course, some people will be retrained, but most will not. So it makes no sense to keep letting millions of illegal or legal immigrants flood into the United States and to keep the tens of millions that they already have here. Invaders who have also chosen the highest birth rate of all ethnicities in America, in the near future, America will have to initiate a basic universal income to prevent widespread poverty and civil unrest as people lose their jobs. Joblessness in itself is a source of civil unrest. The less dependence on a government welfare system, the better. The lower the unemployment rate, the better. Achieving ambitious social projects like universal health care and UBI would become far more likely to succeed if tens of millions of dependents are removed. Now, just a side note here, this isn't the end of this section, but a lot of people have focused on the automation thing and another issue that's going to come up as him spouting a left-wing talking point. Let me try to explain something. This is not strictly a left-wing talking point, and this is one of those ones where the far left and the far right, like, horseshoe theory is so bent here that it almost becomes a circle. And the idea is that these are people who are anxious about being replaced by anything or anybody. So they view brown people as a threat. They view immigrants as a threat. They view robots as a threat. They don't want anything to be changed. That's what they're against, is the social and cultural and economic upheaval that all of these changes will bring. And this is a direct reaction to that. And it's been described as economic anxiety. I don't call it economic anxiety. It's cultural anxiety. And it takes many forms. It's not just anti-immigrant. It's also anti-automation. It's anti-progress. So, like I said, it's not, being against automation is not just an Andrew Yang left-wing talking point. Like, there's a lot of people, and a lot of Yang supporters actually, that are far right who do support him because of his stance against automation and his stance for a UBI. Anyway, moving on. I just want to take a minute and try to kind of explain that very weirdness and how horseshoe theory is real, y'all. I keep telling you that it's real. Anyway, even though new migrants do the dirty work, their kids typically don't. They want to live the American dream, which is why they get college degrees and fill higher paid skilled positions. This is why corporations lobby for even more illegal immigration even after decades of it happening. They need to help to keep replenishing the low-skilled labor pool. Even as migrant children flood skilled jobs, corporations make this worse by lobbying for even more work visas to be issued for skilled foreign workers to come here. Recently, the Senate under a Republican administration has greatly increased the number of foreign workers that will take American jobs. Remember that both Democrats and Republicans support immigration and work visas. Corporations need to keep replenishing the labor pool for both skilled and unskilled jobs to keep wages down. So automation is a good thing, as it will eliminate the need for new migrants to fill unskilled jobs that Americans can't survive on anyway. Automation can and would replace millions of low-skilled jobs if immigrants were deported. The source of competition for skilled labor from immigrants and visa holders around the world has made a very difficult situation even worse for natives as they compete in the skilled job market. To compete, people have to get better credentials by spending more time in college. It used to be that a high school degree was worth something. Now, a bachelor's degree is what's recommended to be competitive in the job market. The cost of college degrees has exploded as their value has plummeted. This has led to a generation of indebtedness, overqualified students filling menial, low-paying, and unfulfilling jobs. Of course, these migrants and their children have contributed to the problem, but are not the sole cause of it. Okay, I'm sure a bunch of you has picked up on the cognitive dissonance of not wanting white people's jobs to be eliminated by automation, but being okay if, like, brown people's jobs are eliminated through automation. Like, if it's the immigrants' jobs, like, I don't give a fuck. But if it's my job, God, no, that's fucking horrible. Like, I can't have that. So, it's one of those where, like, the mask kind of slips a little bit, and it's like, the problem is with brown people. Like, you have a problem with brown people. You can say you don't, but you do. And the whole idea that, and I'm trying to think of the best way to try to explain this. A lot of what is in there too, especially the high-skilled, low-skilled immigrant thing, is again another fairly mainstream Republican talking point. Like, you hear this argument all the time on anti-immigration is like, well, we want the high-skilled people, but not the low-skilled people, because the low-skilled people are going to drive down wages. And even though that is factually incorrect, it sounds right to a lot of people, and it buys into confirmation biases that they have, so they keep repeating it as many times as we keep explaining to people that no, that's not what happens. It actually bumps up the wages for low-skilled workers. Yeah, we keep having that conversation. And what's interesting is he does point out a point that I have made, which is if you're going to prefer high-skilled workers over low-skilled workers, aren't you kind of screwing over natives more so that way? I mean, he does make a point that low-skilled immigrants typically take jobs that Americans do not want to do, and that high-skilled immigrants typically take jobs that Americans would like, but for one reason or another are not filling. Whether there's a gap in supply and demand, whether it's a wage thing, things like that. So it's a lot of what passes for mainstream conservative thought right now. And it's not edgy. Like, there's nothing edgy here at all, which is frightening because, again, this is the ideology that he just used to kill 20 people. Anyway, we are not entirely done with this section yet, so let's go ahead and finish it. The American lifestyle affords our citizens an incredible quality of life. However, our lifestyle is destroying the environment of our country. The decriminalization of the decimation of the environment is creating a massive burden for future generations. Corporations are heading the destruction of our environment by shamelessly over-harvesting resources. This has been a problem for decades. For example, this phenomenon is brilliantly portrayed in the decades-old classic The Lorax. Watersheds from around the country, especially in agricultural areas, are being depleted. Fresh water is being polluted from farming and oil drilling operations. Consumer culture is creating thousands of tons of unnecessary plastic waste and electronic waste, and recycling to help slow this down is almost non-existent. Urban sprawl creates inefficient cities which unnecessarily destroys millions of acres of land. We even use God knows how many trees worth of paper towels just to wipe water off of our hands. Everything I've seen and heard in my short life has led me to believe that the average American isn't willing to change their lifestyle, even if the change only causes a slight inconvenience. The government is unwilling to tackle these issues beyond empty promises since they are owned by corporations. Corporations that also like immigration because more people means a bigger market for their products. I just want to say that I love the people of this country, but goddamn, most of y'all are too stubborn to change your lifestyle. So the next logical step is to decrease the amount of number of people in America using resources. If we can get rid of enough people, then our way of life can become more sustainable. Setting aside the fact that he just made the Thanos argument for why half the people on the planet need to be eliminated, a lot of people have looked at this and, again, viewed the idea of conservationism and being worried about climate change as a strictly left-wing talking point. Here's a thing I learned the other day, though. I was reading an article, I forget, it was either a Vox or a Slate article, which, once I explain it, you'll understand why it was either a Vox or a Slate article, but it was about a farmer's market, and I forget exactly where, but there was a couple there who were selling at the farmer's market, and the other people at the farmer's market figured out that they were white nationalists. And so through this article, reading it, I learned that there is actually a strain of white supremacist, white nationalist, far-right, alt-right, whatever the fuck we're calling them this week, thought that they're super, super into, like, organic, sustainable farming, about farming your own food, making sure that it's as clean and healthy as possible. And it's a big thing for these people. And so, obviously, if that is your concern, then climate change is going to be part of your concern, because if the ground becomes unworkable, like if we have a famine or something like that, that's going to be a threat to their very, like, mid-19th century, like, Germanic pastoral ideal of what life is. Like, there's very much a strain of, like, people should be working the land and making their own food, and it's like, it's this whole thing. And it sounds weird, but it also goes hand in hand with the kind of anti-corporation stance that all the food in the grocery store is junk, and it's full of chemicals, and Monsanto, and they're turning the frogs gay, and it's all crap, and the only way that you can be safe is just to have your own food and grow your own food. So, it's again, one of those where, like, the far left and the far right really merge up really close to each other as far as, like, their concerns for the future and their particular interest and why they have certain interest. So, yeah, like, there's a couple things in here that are kind of illuminating as to where, like, far-right thought is on certain things that I don't think a lot of people realize is a thing in far-right ideology. And moving on from that, again, in this section, you have a lot of that anti-corporation sort of rhetoric that you're starting to hear more and more and more and more come from conservatives. Like, this isn't, again, I keep coming back to this, but this is mainstream conservative thought. This isn't fringe. Being anti-corporation isn't fringe. Being anti-immigration isn't fringe. Thinking that immigrants are going to come here and replace you isn't fringe, because these people have been told this for years now, that the migrant horde is going to come here and take your jobs, and automation is going to eliminate your jobs, and the corporations fucking hate you, and they're evil and they're awful, and yeah. I mean, he's not getting this from nowhere. He's not even getting this from, like, 8chan. He's getting this from, like, Fox News and Donald Trump. And that's not to blame anybody in particular, but when your message is basically being repeated verbatim in a manifesto written by a mass shooter, maybe take a second and stop and think that what you're saying is probably, take it down from like an 11 to maybe a 5, because people are losing their shit over this stuff, and it's like, oh my god. Anyway, we're not done with this manifesto yet. We're almost there, though. I'm trying to see. Do I want to do this? Well, for the sake of being complete on this, I will do the section labeled gear, because there is some things to be said here. So, this is him listing the gear that he planned on using, did end up using, anyway. Main gun, AK-47. I realized pretty quickly that this isn't a great choice since it's the civilian version of the AK-47. It's not designed to shoot rounds quickly, so it overheats after almost 100 shots fired in quick succession. I'll have to use a heat-resistant glove to get around this. I shouldn't laugh. That's not funny. It is slightly funny, though. Like, sitting here critiquing, like, I don't think I picked the right gun. I should have picked a different gun, maybe? I don't know. But again, it speaks to a point that I made earlier, that the how isn't as important as the who and the why. Because, I mean, he could have easily swapped this out for a different gun, or for a different method altogether. Like, the how isn't really what's important. But there's more discussion here that I don't think is, like, super pertinent. But the last paragraph of this section really stood out to me, and this is odd. Anyway, I didn't spend much time at all preparing for this attack. Maybe a month, probably less. I have to do this before I lose my nerve. I figured that an underprepared attack in a manifesto is better than no attack and no manifesto. Now, all I can do is take his word that this wasn't super planned out. I don't know. It seems awfully fucking planned out to me that you picked a Walmart in El Paso. Like, that you could have, it's Texas. Texas, for Christ's sake. Like, you could have found a place a hell of a lot closer to Allen, Texas, to go shoot Mexicans if you really wanted to shoot Mexicans in Texas. I'm not endorsing shooting Mexicans in Texas, or Mexicans anywhere, or shooting anybody. But this idea that it was just done on a whim, I'm not buying that. It seems a little too planned out to have been just, whatever, I'm gonna go get a gun and go shoot a bunch of Mexicans at Walmart. Like, I'm not buying that. Anyway, moving on to the next section. Reaction. Statistically, millions of migrants have returned to their home countries to reunite with their families that they lost contact with when they moved to America. They come here as economic immigrants, not for asylum reasons. This is an encouraging sign that the Hispanic population is willing to return to their home countries if given the right incentive. An incentive that myself and many other patriotic Americans will provide. This will remove the threat of the Hispanic voting bloc, which will make up for the loss of millions of baby boomers. This will also make the elites that run the corporations realize it's not in their interest to continue to piss off Americans. Corporate America doesn't need to be destroyed, but to be shown that they are on the wrong side of history. That if they don't bend, they will break. Now we're getting to the delusions of grandeur part. Like, this... Okay, so you're going to fix the scourge of immigration and corporatism. Okay, by shooting a bunch of people. Like, this is... It's funny to watch people try to justify their actions and to try to dress up their racism as patriotism. I mean, this is not patriotism. It's just racism. It's like, you have a problem with brown people. I have a lot more respect for people that just say they have a problem with brown people than people that try to gussy it up as some kind of I'm saving the country, because you're not. You're fucking not. So stop it. Anyway, we're still not done. I told you this was short. It's shorter than the Christchurch one, but we're almost there. We're on the last section. Personal reasons and thoughts. My whole life I've been preparing for a future that currently doesn't exist. The job of my dreams will likely be automated. Hispanics will take control of the local and state government of my beloved Texas, changing policy to better suit their needs. They will turn Texas into an instrument of a political coup, which will hasten the destruction of our country. The environment is getting worse by the year. If you take nothing else from this document, remember this: inaction is a choice. I can no longer bear the shame of inaction, knowing that our founding fathers have endowed me with the rights needed to save our country from the brink of destruction. Our European comrades don't have the gun rights needed to repeal the millions of invaders that plague their country. They have no choice but to stand by and watch their countries burn. Again, there's the use of the word invasion, and there's also the invocation of Europe and letting their countries burn, which again, he didn't get that verbiage from nowhere. That's, again, fairly common mainstream verbiage when people talk about immigration in Europe. Like this, he didn't pull this shit out of his ass, people. America can only be destroyed from the inside out. If our country fails, it will be the fault of traitors. This is why I see my actions as faultless. Because this isn't an act of imperialism, but an act of preservation. America is full of hypocrites who will blast my actions as the sole result of racism and hatred of other countries, despite the extensive evidence of all the problems these invaders cause and will cause. People who are hypocrites because they support imperialistic wars that have caused the loss of tens of thousands of American lives and untold numbers of civilian lives. The argument that mass murder is okay when it is state-sanctioned is absurd. Our government has killed a whole lot more people for a whole lot less. So whataboutism is your excuse for this? Again, I'm not a fan of whataboutism either. Like, if you're going to do something, do it on your own merits. Don't try to... stop. Anyway, we're going to finish this. Even if other non-immigrant targets would have had a greater impact, I can't bring myself to kill my fellow Americans. Even the Americans that seem hell-bent on destroying our country. Even if they are shameless race mixers, massive polluters, hatred of our collective values, etc. One day they will see error of their ways. Either when American patriots fail to reform our country and it collapses, or when we save it. But they will see the error of their ways, I promise y'all that. I am against race mixing because it destroys genetic diversity and creates identity problems. Also because it's completely unnecessary and selfish. Second and third generation Hispanics from interracial unions are at much higher rates than average. Yet another reason to send them back. Cultural and race diversity is largely temporary. Cultural diversity diminishes as stronger and/or more appealing cultures overtake weaker and/or undesirable ones. Racial diversity will disappear as either race mixing or genocide will take place. But the idea of deporting or murdering all non-white Americans is horrific. Many have been here at least as long as the whites and have done as much to build our country. The best solution to this for now would be to divide America into a confederacy of territories with at least one territory for each race. The physical separation would nearly eliminate race mixing and improve social unity by granting each race self-determination within their respective territories. Now this right here, this is why so many of us get a little fidgety and irritated when certain elements of the right like to play footsie with the race and IQ crowd and the biological differences crowd. This is what that shit leads to. And it's not cutesy just asking questions or let's investigate biology, it's science. No, you're basically saying to people like this that it's okay to segregate people based on race. That races are inherently different and that they must be segregated, and that's the only way to do this. Like, this is where that shit leads, and that's why a lot of us push back so much on it when we see it. I mean, and I don't understand how people who push those kinds of ideas don't understand that this is the end game. I don't get it. But moving on. My death is likely inevitable. If I'm not killed by the police, then I'll probably be gunned down by one of the invaders. Captured in this case is far worse than dying during the shooting because I'll get the death penalty anyway. Worse still is that I would have knowing that my family despises me. This is not the best English. For somebody who's worried about migrant invaders, like, you You could have done better in English class, my dude. This is why I'm not going to surrender even if I run out of ammo. If I'm captured, it will be because I was subdued somehow. Well, dude was captured. That part didn't work out too well. Remember, it is not cowardly to pick low-hanging fruit. AKA, don't attack heavily guarded areas to fulfill your super soldier COD fantasy. Attack low-security targets. Even though you might outgun a security guard or policeman, they are likely to beat you in armor, training, and numbers. Do not throw away your life on an unnecessarily dangerous target. If a target seems too hot, live to fight another day. My ideology has not changed for several years. My opinions on automation, immigration, and the rest predate Trump and his campaign for president. I'm putting this here because some people will blame the president or certain presidential candidates for the attack. This is not the case. I know that the media will probably call me a white supremacist anyway and blame Trump's rhetoric. The media is infamous for fake news. The reaction to this attack will likely just confirm that. Many people think that the fight for America is already lost. They couldn't be more wrong. This is just the beginning of the fight for America and Europe. I'm honored to head the fight to reclaim my country from destruction. Okay. Whether or not his ideology has changed or not, I don't know. I don't know, dude. But what I will say, and this is not to completely assign blame to Trump or to anybody else, but they have created the environment where this line of thought is actually, like, perfectly fine and permissible to say in public. Like, there's plenty of people who have television shows with millions of people who spout a lot of the same shit that this dude just talked about. Like, that's the problem here, is when it's the environment. And it's one of those where it's like, again, I don't want to assign blame to anybody because the only person to blame is the shooter. But to not discuss the fact of how he got here and where he got these talking points and how he got to this point would be to ignore the problem that really exists. Like, the problem isn't the guns, the problem is the ideology. And so that is why I decided to read the manifesto and discuss it, because we need a deeper understanding of what the hell is going on here. And I wanted to do it also to point out that, again, a lot of the things that he said aren't fringe at all. They're mainstream. And that's a little frightening. Like, people talk about how much the Dem socks and socialists have pulled the Democratic Party to the left, but nobody really talks about how much the far right and the white nationalist, white supremacist crowd has pulled the Republican/conservatives over way, way far right on certain topics. But obviously that has happened. So that is why I really wanted to have that particular discussion, which I'm sure will be an ongoing discussion that will be demagogued by both sides, and everybody's going to point fingers and everybody's going to assign blame. And all I want is for everybody to kind of take a second and think a little deeper than just saying, oh, it's Trump's fault, or it's the gun's fault, or whatever sides, whatever tribe you adhere to's excuse du jour for this mass shooting. There's a lot more going on here, people. It's a lot deeper than surface shit. And if we want any chance of combating this as a society, we really need to start looking seriously at the causes of these mass shootings. And even, I mean, it's this shooting, it's the New Zealand shooting, it's the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting, it's this increasing amount of mass shootings that are specifically targeting specific races. Like, obviously, he was targeting Mexicans. The Pittsburgh shooting was obviously targeting Jews. The New Zealand shooting was obviously targeting Muslims. And it's all coming from the same ideology in the same place. And so that's why this needs to be more openly discussed and not just kind of shoved off as like, oh, well, we can't give these people any attention. We can't give this light. We can't give this heat. We can't give these people what they want. It has to be discussed. And so here we are, having a discussion. having a conversation, because that's what we do. So, before we leave out of this, another topic that obviously always comes up every time a mass shooting happens is the whole gun control argument. Now, this has been beaten to death and will continue to be beaten to death for forever and ever and ever until something changes, which I don't see it actually ever changing, because here's the first thing. And here's how I kind of frame this particular argument. I don't recall the last time that a mass shooting took place where it was discovered that the shooter illegally obtained their guns. So that part of the discussion, the whole, oh, we got to eliminate private sales, we got to eliminate gun show loopholes, that just irritates the hell out of me. Those conversations, I don't feel are pertinent to this particular conversation, because that's not how these shooters are obtaining their guns. They're getting them through the legal gun buying process in the United States. So when people say that they want stricter gun laws, my question is, what do you want? Like, what do you mean? Like, these people are already passing through our gun buying, like, our process, which is not just like show up, buy a gun, leave. Like, there is federal backgrounds, like mandatory background checks if you're buying a gun through a shop or through a dealer. And there's already the federal database. It already checks for felonies. And yes, this has failed a couple times because of states not reporting the way they're supposed to report. That's a situation that we can discuss and can possibly be fixed, but I don't know exactly what more people want. And I'm finding it very difficult to take in good faith people who just throw out, we want stricter gun laws, but you're not really being specific. Like, what more do you want? Like, what differences in the process that we have right now would you like to see? So maybe at some point after one of these mass shootings, somebody will actually have something constructive to say on the topic. But as it stands right now, it's more virtue signaling and nonsense, and it's irritating at this point, because it's like, okay, something does need to be done. And like I said, I don't think it needs to be on the gun side, because there's plenty of other ways to kill people. But just demagoguing guns every time this happens, like, you're ignoring the real problems. And it's starting to get very grating. Very, very grating. Because it's like, are you seriously concerned with this, or are you not? Or, like, do you really want to solve this problem? Or do you want the dopamine hits on Twitter for getting likes and retweets? Like, what? I get very irritated with people who want to bitch about a problem, but don't want to try to come up with some kind of constructive solutions to the problem. So, anyway, that's it for that. I'm going to go ahead and leave off, because this has already gone longer than I planned, and I wanted to discuss this, because I feel like, I don't know, I'm sure plenty of other podcasters will have the same discussion and talk about this, and everybody's free to do it however they want, because everybody has their own show and you can run it however you want. But I wanted to have my contribution to this conversation to maybe add something to it. So there we go. That's it. Like I said, wrapping this up. If you did make it this far, thank you as always. And if you do like this, please rate, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Spotify, and YouTube. Take care, and until next time.